Okay, so I'm trying not to take a lot of time, but I'm trying to be thorough with how Umbraco is structured and how it works. I undoubtedly believe there'll be questions after, but hopefully I can get through it within an hour, and so I'm not take too much time. And I'm happy to answer questions on or off this topic, but it's also hopefully something that after you've seen it, you can kind of understand a little bit. And even if you've forgotten a lot of the content, you can either go back and look at this presentation later, or at least you have an idea of where to look for something. This is the topics we're going to try and cover. Again, it's very aggressive. It's a lot. But we're going to try and talk about the basic concept, how to use it, the document types, templates, partial views, media, everything. So quite a lot here. So let's get started. The basic concept is actually very, very simple. It's simply that we are going to have a document type that is going to eventually be added to user content. We use a template to render the document type and the content together to make a rendered page that is actually sent down to the browser. The basic concept may be simple, but some of the intricacies may not be, but that's all there is to it. There's document types that define what the user is able to add, what the types of content the user will add. The user adds that content. We marry it with a template, which is kind of a razor syntax, and we can emit any HTML we need. Okay, so let's talk a little bit. The biggest thing is pages are related via hierarchy. So if you're not used to thinking of a website as a hierarchical structure, then this might be a little foreign, but it's pretty natural. The only thing I don't find natural is that there's typically the home page as the only root element, and then all the content is underneath it. And the reason I don't find that natural is because the home page is going to be slash, and then all the child root elements underneath it are going to have their own first level name. If I had a child under a child, then the slug for that would be the name slash, the child name, and so on and so forth. So it seems a little odd to me, but it does have some advantages, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Content can be pulled up and down the hierarchy. So what that means is, let's say I'm this guy here, and I'm maybe an about page. I can look at the page in front of it, and I can get any of the content off of it. I can look at the home page and get any content off of it. I can get any of the meta content up or down. So if I'm this page here and I've got this child, I can look at the content of my child elements. So the hierarchy is actually not just a way of organizing the site, it's a way of organizing how the content exists in the site. Different permissions can be assigned, we'll see that. Different roles can be assigned, we'll see that. So let's look at that real quick. So what I've got over here is, this is a local copy of the WGU project we've been working on. So in order to get to Umbraco, after I start up the project, I just go to /Umbraco and I'll get a login screen that looks like this. And this is Umbraco 8. So it's a little bit different than the previous versions. The main difference is just that the tabs are across the top rather than down the side. And here we go. So here's the home node I was talking about. And, oh, come on, there we go. And then in the home page, here's all of the content that I was talking about. So we've got a page name, which is going to render probably as part of the title. We've got keywords and descriptions for SEO purposes, logo for content purposes. We've got other kinds of content. You'll notice they're divided into these kind of sections. These used to be tabs in older versions, but now they're just kind of continuous sections these days. And over here in the info tab, we have a full history of what's ever happened to this page. So anytime this page has been changed, it keeps a backup of it. If we wanted to, we could republish any of these old versions of it. We can see what's kind of changed between the versions. Another thing to look at is this right here. This is saying the English US URL is this right here. Again, if I want to roll back, I can click this button. We'll talk about templates a little bit more, but you can have actually multiple templates per document type. But it's saying our document type is called a home document, and our template is also called home. Typically, this is a one-to-one type thing, but it would be helpful sometimes to have multiple, as we might discuss. And then other actions I can do, I can preview, save, unpublish, publish, all kinds of things. So then we can see login is inside a home. And you can also see we've got the same tab here for the header. That's no accident, and I'll show you why that is in a bit. Here's the dashboard page, which is going to have that same page plus a little bit of content. And we've got some, even some sub content. You'll notice on this contact us, if we look at the link, we've got that whole path. So we got home/par/contact us, and that's all in the link that is automatically generated for us. Okay, any questions about the content part here? Okay, so let's skip back to our slides for a minute. So the next big thing is the document type. Everything actually starts with the document type, but I thought it'd be better to start with how the user is actually going to see it. The document type defines how everything is going to work. So it's going to decide what content is required for this type of page. So if I have, for example, in a later demo, we'll do a job posting page. Well, for a job posting, I might need a lot of different content, like the title, the salary range, a description of the job, images perhaps, all kinds of these different things, requirements. All those are going to be bits of content that I'm going to define as required to do that type of page. We also have to decide what the relationship that documents can have with one another. Because I can use content up and down that hierarchy, right? So I've got pages. Because I can use content both up and down that hierarchy, I have to be able to control what's allowed to be nested inside of what. So this page has to say, I can only have items of type A or B, but nothing else. And then this item of type A can say, I can only have items of type C and nothing else. So that's the relationships and how they work with one another. What templates are available? So you saw a moment ago I was showing you that the home page was using the home template. Well, you can't just pick any arbitrary template. The template has to be expecting the content. So it really marries together what templates are created to render that kind of document type. And then they could be inherited. And I'm saying inherited, but I really mean this as more of an interface composition type thing, and I'll show you more of that in our demo. Does not need to be for entire page, or it can be partial. So we can create document types that don't actually render, but are just kind of data for us to render inside of different content later. We have a list view of children. This will be shown later on. So let's see. The editors, there's editors here. I'll show you those in our demo mostly, but they are cool because you can expand, create any type of editor. Anything in the system is extensible, which is cool. Data types are a way of defining different types of data that the user could be putting on a page. So an example of a data type might be a URL. I think they might already have that data type, but let's say the system only had text strings as kind of a base data type, and you wanted a special data type for URL. You could create that data type, and then any place where someone wanted to specify URL, they could use that data type and the rules associated with that. Okay, so let's do that. So back to our content. Over here in the settings page, we have a bunch of, let me get them all expanded, just, oops, collapsed here. but we have a bunch of these document types. When you install Umbraco, you can choose to have it populate the site with content, or you can choose to have it blank. If you choose to have it with content, it'll create some document types for you. I have them over here in the archives just for a matter of interest. So over here in the home page, you can see they have a tab called Hero, and they've got a header, description, a call to action, text strings, all required. They have another tab called Content, which has the grid, have another tab for the footer, etc., etc. And then there's this kind of this interesting thing over here with compositions, which I'll talk about later, but just note that it's there. So our page here all starts with the notion of a content page. So in a content page, actually I lie, I think. Hang on, I can't remember. Master. Okay, well, I guess I don't have any of that going, maybe. Inherited from master. Okay, it all starts with master. Where's master? Okay, it all starts with master here. And master is what defines like the page name, if we're going to hide it from the navigation, the SEO keywords, description, the logo. All these things apply pretty much to every single page. So it makes sense for us to have kind of an inheritance style thing going on here. So you can see this content page, it inherits from master, and that's why we have this header page. It says it's inherited from master, so I can't change anything here. If I wanted to actually change these, I'd really be wanting to change them in master. And on top of that, I'm adding this content section here, and this is for the table content section, the main content area section, and the right headline section that is defined in that template. And they're just rich text and grid editors. And if I wanted to add another another page, I could add another group. We'll call this test. And I don't know, if we wanted a color picker, we could add color. You'll note this alias it creates here. This alias is important. This is what we use in the code later. You'll see if I say color of background. It's actually going to change to a one-word symbol for us. We can add a description if you want, change color of background. And then before we get to here, we can say if it's mandatory or not, and then any other kind of validation we need. Custom validation is just a regex. Okay, so let's do add editor. So we've got two main tabs here, a create new and a use existing. I recommend using the use existing unless you have good reason to create new. The create new is going to create something like this. So you have blog / how many posts it should be / slider. We have blog post category tags. Those are ones that have already been created for a specific purpose. And the reason to create new is simply because we want to persist the settings. And it might make sense for more of the more complex data types. So if I was doing a grid, I might be more amenable to doing a create a new type for it. But if I'm going to do simple text box, it makes no sense to have a customized text box simply because of the maximum number of characters allowed. I can edit that without creating a whole new type anyway. So if I go to use existing and I say text box, I can do that anyway. And if I need to, I can still say I want a 200 character limit, but I wouldn't be creating a whole new document type that I want to reuse later. So I guess the whole point here is I wish it was a little bit more user-friendly for people to understand. You should probably use existing 99% of the time. Only if we're going to create a reusable thing later should we create a new type for it. But in this case, let's use our text box and say submit. So here we go. I've got my test section with my colored background. And actually, I probably want a color picker for this, so let me change it out. Okay, so here's my color picker, and I'm just gonna have a couple of colors that they can select. Okay, and submit, save. So now I've got that saved. If I were to go back and look at the content on a content page, I will have this new thing. So let's go look. So contact us is a content page. I know because it says over here, it says a content page. And if I scroll down enough, I'll see, oh yeah, here's the color background. So let me say black, and I can say save. Actually, let me save and publish. And it didn't do anything yet because we haven't done anything with that in the template, but it did change our editor experience, which is half the battle here. So let's see, one second. Data types, document type. Okay, so we talked about editors. Okay. I still need to talk about document types. So we kind of got a little bit of the document types while we're inside of these inside of the document types editor, but the document types also live down here as data types. So document types, I meant data types, sorry. The data types also live here. So anything you created in the editor also shows up here. But you can also create your own. And we could just do that by saying I want to create a new data type. So let's say we wanted to create a new data type for, job skill. What we can do is we can pick through one of these editors. Again, if one of these editors doesn't suit your need, you can customize this list. It just requires integration a little bit more further down. It's a little more complex. But so let's say job skill is, let's say that's a tags. And so I can save this. And then I'll use it later on, and you'll see that we have kind of a new job skill type editor in our document type. So come down here. And so here we go. We have a job skills editor. We save that. Go back to our content. We'll be able to say, C#, Java, script, etc. Okay, so any questions about the document types? I didn't cover everything. Let me go back. Sorry. Compositions. So you know how I said that document types were inheritable? That is kind of true. It's not inheritance as you would think of it in like the object-oriented sense, though. It's more like applying interfaces. So I can select all of these things, and you see it's just bringing in tab after tab of content. This is more of a has-a type inheritance instead of is-a type inheritance, if that makes sense. For one, I can only go one deep in terms of if someone tries to inherit this content page, they can't. It will bar it out. See how some of these don't allow it? That's because they already have an inheritance in place, and they don't allow it more than one deep. And additionally, it only makes sense for has a type relationships. So this is kind of something where, let's say my page has a header. We could create a document type for header and say the home page has a header. Therefore, we're going to include header here. So remember, this is a has-a type inheritance, not a is-a type inheritance. Does that make sense to everybody? You guys are all awfully quiet. I hope I'm doing a good job here. Okay. Oh, shoot. You know what? I forgot to record this damn thing. Let me start now. Oh, do you? Okay. Yeah, I'm going to anyway, but thanks. Okay. So another thing I'm going to show you is over here in templates, we could say these are the templates that are allowed to render it. Again, we can choose multiple. Permissions, this is where I was saying we need to be in control of who is allowed to nest under me. So I can say, oh, well, a content page can be, I can be inside myself, or a contact, or navigation base, whatever it is. All these pages can be a child under a content page. Allow as root is whether it can be a root node. So currently only home has allow root. Allow varying by culture. So if we're going to create a CMS that is culture aware, e.g. if you're visiting the site from Mexico, the browser culture string it's going to pass in is going to be ESMX, and we can give you a different page altogether based off that culture string. But there's also other ways we can do multicultural, so it doesn't have to be that way. And then is an element type is a very unique thing we're going to look at in a bit later, but it's for a special case of nesting that we'll show. Okay, and then list view is part of that special case of nesting, but enable list view means I am going to be a content hub. So let me show you what this looks like if I can. So I'm going to enable this as list view, and I'm just going to create just a piece of content here. Now what that does is in the contact us page, I can now create one of these other pages that go underneath it, right? Sorry, one second. Okay, so, but now when I come back here, it's going to show me all my child pages in this list view format. So I'm no longer going to see it as an expandable hierarchy here. It's going to be shown simply as in this list view content underneath it. And then I can also manage them that way. So I can unpublish, publish, copy, move, delete. If I create another one, it can even be a different type. I'm sorry, I'm not very good with typing right now. Okay, so now I've got 2 in there. I think if I saved it. Anyway, I should have 2 in there, but I can also create them from here pretty easily. I can search by stuff. I can sort by different ways. So, yeah. So that's what that's for. And again, we'll show a little bit more of that in a minute. All right, so let's go back to the presentation here. Okay, templates. Templates is where that content and that document type all get pulled together. When I talk about content, though, where's my mouse? There we go. When I talk about content, though, I'm not talking just about the content entered in that editor for the document type. It could be the elements surrounding it. It could be a dictionary item that's used for translation typically. It could be any kind of content that this is dispersed from. This could even be like JSON content. I mean, these are the typical ones, but it can be anything. And then the document type. The document type is defining the content, of course, but it gives us kind of a typed view of how it looks. They are in Razor syntax. They are either typed or untyped. They can be inherited as deeply as required. Unlike the document types, these templates can inherit as many differences as can. So this is a case of is-a rather than has-a, because you only get one of it, but it can be deep as needed. Just need to put a render body in if you are intended to be used by another child. And there's some really great things in these templates that you'll see when I do my walkthrough that allow us to keep the structure pretty clean, but also allow child pages to get done what they need. Okay, so let's go look at our templates walkthrough. So in settings, we've talked about document types, talked about data types. Let's talk about templates now. So in here, I've got one called master. And for anyone who's done ASP.MVC, this should look very, very familiar in terms of what the markup looks like. The notion of rendering partial is completely native to ASP.MVC. The notion of rendering different sections is completely native to MVC, but there's a few things that are not necessarily native. So let's talk about those now. The first thing you'll notice is I've got these require JS and require CSS tags in here. What these are is actually part of a framework called client dependency. Now, the client dependency framework you can get on NuGet and you can apply it to any MVC project. But by default in Umbraco, it is already something that's included in here. When I say included, you have to add this typically, but we don't have to add a new NuGet package for client dependency. It uses it already. What it does is we specify all of the JavaScript files we need in the order we need them, and we tell all the CSS files we need in the order we need them. And then at some later point, usually on the basis most template, which is this guy, we will render all of those CSS and JS files. That happens to be right here. So right here, I'm doing an HTML.render CSS here. And later on, I've got a render JS here, where the JavaScript is supposed to be after the footer. What this is going to do is you'll see I've got a JS that is a CDN. With these, it's not going to do anything with those. It's going to pretty much emit a script tag that has a source for this guy right here directly. But it's going to make sure it's going to do it in the right order. For local resources, ones that start with the tilde/, it's going to combine all the resources required for the page that was requested, and it's going to combine them, minify them, put a cache buster string on them, and that's going to be what's rendered here. So first it'll render one of these, and then probably just one other of all the local scripts, and then it's done. You'll also notice in my section here, you'll also notice my template here, I've got these render sections. I think this is pretty good practice. You're not only ever going to have subpages that need to put CSS here. There might be legitimate other tags that need to be rendered in the head that allows you to have those child pages get what they need inside the head. Typically in a master page, you might have a little more markup than this. I mean, there might be some things more in this, but this one's a really kind of lightweight one. I also have a render partial footer for, mainly I think this would be for, this is render partial. A render section scripts. This would be for probably scripts that are just script tags rather than script files is what's kind of meant for this. And last thing I want to point out is this inherits Umbraco view page. This is an untyped view. And so to get its stuff, we do at model.value and we tell it the name of the property we want. This fallback to ancestors is a good example of how we can get values up and down the hierarchy, right? And it's easy to generate those. There's actually a neat little tool here. We say insert, and we're going to insert a value, and we choose all these fields. So there's these fields that are part of any document type that uses it. Plus, there's these ones that start with Umbraco, which are Umbraco specific. Plus, there are node type fields where you can navigate to different documents and things, and other bits of metadata that are available in here. But let's say I want to render my blah. I have a few options. If it doesn't have a value, I could add a default value. So my default blah value could be hi people. I can make it recursive, which does the fallback to ancestors. That just means if it's not on this page, look on the page ahead of it and see if it has that property. And that's that property set. If it's not set there, look at the next one, and so on and so forth, before falling back to the default value. And here we go. So it says model value blah. That's my alias. Remember, the alias was that piece that was auto-generated when I was putting the title in. And I've got other things here, but this could all be simplified to simply this if it's a text string. If it's a more complex type, you're going to have to pull it out as a type. This value has generics, so we can do I publish content of, you know, whatever type. So I can get these back as typed, and then, you know, we can get other properties off of top of them. Okay, inside my master, I've got a home page. And in this home page, you can see we're saying layout is master at CSS.HTML. That's all I need to inherit from it, but it also allows us to do it here if we needed to. You can see we're just adding our own bit of stuff here. Where this gets rendered is inside of that render body tag here. If we look at something like the dashboard, this is a bit more complex of a use case, so let's look at this. We are requiring different CSS and different JavaScript files. Actually, these are in addition to the main template ones. And so by adding these dependencies here, they get rendered in the right spot and minified and combined correctly. Now, if we look, I've got this section scripts. We needed a script tag inside of here, and we wanted that script tag to be rendered in the right spot. So I put that in the script section, but I could have also created a header section if I needed something in the header, which I didn't in this one. Next thing you'll notice is this one is a typed page. So in theory, I don't have to say model.value table of contents. In theory, I should be able to say model.table of contents, if I spelled that correctly, and get the value that way. However, if I need any of this fallback or default value stuff, I can't do it that way. So it's probably easier just to think about it always using this kind of syntax. That way you don't have to remember to, but it is an option. We can make these views typed, and we can do those kinds of things. Let's see. Query Builder, let's look at that for a moment. So one of the common use cases for understanding what's up and down is I want to see what child nodes I have. Maybe that affects the navigation. In this Query Builder, I can say I want all content from my website where blah and blah. So I want all content from home where, I don't know why it's not popping up. Oh well. And then what it's going to give us is just a simple link expression, and that's all this is really building. But this Umbraco.content, this is where we get, this is getting a particular item. This GUID is the ID of home. Then we're asking for its children, where the children are visible. So this is exactly the query you would need in order to create navigation. So if I were to submit that, it just adds that as a section, code section here. And then you can see it even created this little bit of a for each. So it's saying for each item and section, render its URL and its name. So automatically it kind of rendered what you would need for navigation. And you can put all the things you need around here for navigation. It doesn't have to be rendered using this markup exactly, of course. Okay, and we can even render sections. So let's say we want to render a name section in here. Section name is better, I don't know. We can say if it's mandatory or not. So we can render that here. Or in this case, more likely we want to create a named section of our own. So no, trip system, we've already done one. I don't know. I'm not really good at coming up with examples, but you can see this creates a section called title data that someone else could render later. And if you want more information about sections, this is just a basic Razor concept, so I'm not going to talk too much more about it. There is a couple other things in here though. There's partial views which we could insert, which is just a shortcut for just doing this HTML partial. And then lastly, macro or dictionary item. Macros just allows us to choose one of these macros. And dictionary item is how we do multilingual stuff. So we're going to get the value for save. Okay, so I think that's all there is to say about templates. Have I confused everybody, or are you all following along? Questions? I know I'm going kind of fast, but...
We're following.
Okay.
I am, at least.
Well, good. Okay, so let's talk about media for a moment. One of the main tabs in here is media. Media comes with 3 basic types: an image type for media, file type, and a folder type. The cool thing about media is they work just like the document types. You can specify different media types with different properties. Then in media, you can have those properties added. So let's say we wanted to add a media type for, video. Of course, this is a file, so we're going to upload it. So we're going to have a location for it. But maybe the video has the notion of run length that we might be interested in. Might have the notion of tags we might be interested in. Might have all these other different things we're interested in. The cool thing about media is it could be any type of media, and we can customize and make it what we need. And we'll show that on the walkthrough. Another one I want to do in the next walkthrough is membership. So membership is built into the system. It's using ASP.NET and membership under the hood. The big, what's the word I'm looking for? The obnoxious part about the membership in Umbraco is that they expect you to create your own login and registration screens. They don't really have anything that's really well pre-canned for that, and I can understand why they do it, but it eliminates a lot of the usefulness. But it does have a lot of built-in stuff for managing members, which is very handy. Just like media and document types, you can specify your own fields. So let's say for members, I want to have a Facebook URL, or I want to have age, whatever. We can specify those as types as part of the membership. I'm going to also point this out. This is very confusing to some. Users are not the same as members. So you'll notice in the back end there's a spot for users and there's a back end spot for members. Users are people who get into the back end of Umbraco. Members are people who use the website. Should be easy to think of that way, right? Okay, next piece we're going to talk about in this next demo is macros. So macros are a handy way of rendering a bit of content. You can specify parameters to them. They can be rendered either using partial views or XSLT, or there's actually quite a lot of others that you can render via. However, I've noticed with this latest version, they're only supporting partial views, probably because the other types weren't all that well adopted. But they used to have a half dozen different ways of rendering a macro. Just in case you didn't really understand Razor, you could render it via XSLT. If you don't understand that, you can render it via JavaScript. There's a few different ways. We're not doing that anymore, I think. This may or may not be out for good. I haven't really gotten a definitive word. And then we can specify whether they can be used inside of the rich text editor or inside of the grid, which we haven't talked about a lot yet because we'll get to it. Okay, so here's that walkthrough. Okay, so over here we have media types. Let's actually go to media thing first, though. Okay, so inside of media, I've got these folders that are designated. It's best practice to try and create folders for each page, and if pages are nested, even nest those folders. But at the very least, like here's the Student Success Center. These are all the images that are used in that Student Success Center. Everything in here doesn't have to be an image. I could add, for example, just any old file, and I can click any old file to upload. Oh, that's image. Well, let's try again. I can click a non-image file to upload. It's a zip file, sure. And then, oh, name. I need a name. Content. I can save it, and you see it's got a little bit different icon. Plus, it's got little different things that shows up differently. So with these images, you'll see I've got these bits of metadata. With this content, I don't have as much of that metadata. And I can create new folders in here too. So I can say folder and say subfolder. And this is just a way to provide some more organization. Okay, so that's how I use this. I can create folders in default root too. But now let's look at media types. So if we look at a file, for example, those bits of metadata you saw, that's what these are. So folder doesn't have anything. Image has the size and type in addition to the others. We could create our own, of course. So like before, we talked about we could create video. And we create a property for length. Use these same kind of things. We say text box. And if we were doing this right, I would want to specify a regex that makes length look like, you know, something special. But I'm not going to do that right now. It's just demo. Okay, so save that. Now when we go back to media, we can see we've got this new type. Oh, why don't I have a new type? I forgot to look at the permissions. So permissions, allow as root. Nope. So permissions, allow as root. And then folder will actually have to allow a video. Okay, now we're set up. So now in media, I could be in here. I can say I want a new video, and I don't have a length, but you get the point here. Let's see, I think I might be missing something as well. Oh yeah, I'm missing to upload actual file. I need to add a file to it too, but anyway, maybe the video isn't a file. Maybe the video comes from YouTube, so maybe it still makes sense. But yeah, that's how the media types work. One thing I'm going to say about the media types is I believe them to be awfully messy. So let me show you what I mean by that. So here's my media folder. You can see it's generating a name. It's generating a folder for each file, and then it's putting the file inside of there. And the nested content is just kind of non-hierarchical thing. It doesn't actually do that. I do have a plugin that I've created from Umbraco that basically takes this away. Basically, what you see in the media types is what it's going to generate. So if there's a folder called home, there's going to be a folder called home. And inside there, if there's another folder called whatever, it can be called whatever. And then the files don't get mingled either. So I like to add that to almost all of my Umbraco deploys. And we'll actually show that plugin in a moment. Okay, so that's media. Let's look at membership. Membership happens over here on the Members tab. And if I want to create a member, remember this is like creating a user for the site, not a user for the back end of the site. So I'm going to create one called, Joe. And he has a comments. There's some properties here. I'm actually not going to create him, but we also have member groups that we can create. So we can say there's different groups that are available, and we can even do things like pretend these groups are roles. And those members types that we saw, those are also defined over in settings. So here we go. member types, as you might expect. The member has the comments field we saw, has all these fields that we saw. We can add anything we want to that, and when we come over here to create a member or open an existing member, it'll show these. One thing I'm going to say that I forgot to say before, when editing document types, if you change the type of something from one thing to another, if you have something published already that might already have content there, you might run into problems. For example, if I change this label into something more complex like a list or a grid or something, then it may not be able to correctly course any data that's already in there into that same document type. And indeed, even if you hit it in the editor to fix it, it may have trouble. So it is recommended that if you already have content published and you want to change one of these things, what you do is actually add a new property, give it a slightly different name, and then delete the old property. That allows it to not have run into that particular scenario where you might have encountered an error. Of course, you don't need to do that if none of the content is published yet. You can delete to your heart's content or rename or change these properties. But do be careful. After this is live in production, you can cause problems that are long-ranging. Okay, let's see. What else? Macros. So let's look at macros real quick. Here's the tab for macros. We've already seen a couple places in which we want to render a macro, but this is where we're going to create a macro. So to create a macro, I just do create, and I give it a name. So maybe this macro is get weather. Okay, so in here we have an ID. We have the ability to bind it to a partial view, which we will want to do. We have an option of whether or not we want to allow people to use this inside of the text editor or the grid editor. It doesn't mean that it's automatically going to be an option there. It just means it's going to be an option for them to allow it as an option. Okay, so let's add, actually if I don't add one, I think it's going to add one for me. And then let's add a parameter. So parameters are things like things that are necessary to get this. So maybe the parameter here is city. So we want to get the weather for a particular city, and we'll have a text box where they can supply that. Okay, save that guy. Thought for sure it would have created that. Great. Well, okay, let's pretend that worked. And so you can see on this Get Latest blog post, it's using this partial view. So there's going to be a partial view. Actually, there's a macro partial view, partial views. Okay, actually, I think I can fix it still. Partial view without a macro. Get weather. Okay, so this one, maybe I'll be able to add that now. Yeah, okay, there we go. Okay, so now in this get weather, if we wanted to go off and do some kind of AJAX web call, we can do it in this C# block here, right? Then later we want to render something. Maybe you need that parameter. So to get that parameter, we simply do city. I'm not doing this right, am I, Dan? Hang on. Projects. No, hang on. Well, I think it's model.parameters. city. I'm pretty sure. I have a macro someplace, but I'm not seeing it, so I must have created it elsewhere. But I'm pretty sure it's how you get your parameters, and then later on you can just start rendering content. So we can say h1 and then any other content. Save that. Then when we want to use it someplace, maybe over here or over here. Let's see, over here. Okay, so add content. We're going to add a macro. And we're going to say, oh, this is not allowed in this grid, so we can't use it. Let's make it allowed. So let's go find where we're at. So what we're looking for here is the headline in terms of service. So let's go to document types, terms of service. Find this, this content here, this grid. We go to the settings for the grid. And we tell it what macros are allowed. Is this allowed over here? Oh, there we go. Okay, so back here, terms of service, add content, add a macro, get weather, and parameters apparently was wrong. Oh, expected a semicolon. Yep. Let's fix it. Changes, get weather. Oops, I want the partial view, get weather. Here we go. It doesn't work this time. I'm going to call it good. Get weather. Ah, geez. All right. So I've got a problem, but yeah, parameters wasn't quite right. That's the idea, is that we'll be able to, oops, get rid of that, get weather. We'll be able to select and add some things. So let's say we want 4. Yeah, all right. That's how that works. Sorry for fumbling over that a little bit, but any questions on macros? Okay. Next thing we want to talk about is the grid. The grid is the newest component. It's also the most versatile component, but it also feels like the least polished component, and you'll see what I mean by that in a minute. It's really cool because it allows for the responsive web design, grid-based systems. So we're talking about bootstraps, foundations, and others that allow that. 1 second. Presenter view. There we go. It's somewhat with what you see or what you get. We can customize stuff. We can use with any column model. Okay, so the grid's kind of a big thing, so let's go through that. In order for us to do a grid, it starts with the document type. So let's add, we already have a grid in our content page. Okay, so here we have a grid. The way we did this is we added a property, and then we picked a grid. The grid has a lot of different settings, so let's go through those for a minute. The first set of settings is what layouts are available. Currently we have a 1-column layout, which is whole 12 columns, and we'd say it's 12 columns here. Or this 2-column. If we want more options, we can just say add grid layout. And so we can call it what we want. I'm going to call this, just 3-column layout. And then you can add 3 columns here. You see each of these have a size. Since I want this to typically add up to 12, they are each 4. But maybe I don't want them equal. So maybe these are, 2 each, and this middle one's 6. Something like that. And I'm going to put it back to 4 each. So 4, 4, and 4. Oh, 4, 4, 4. Okay. And that's pretty easy. Row configurations, we can do a different kind of thing, so we can do the same kind of thing with that. The trick here is, see what this is doing. Oop. Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't remember. I think this is naming these. So three column. Okay, again, we have the 12. The settings are kind of cool. These are settings for the grid itself. So you can see we have this class, notion of a class. This is going to allow us to specify a CSS class inside of the settings for this grid. And we could add a number of other things as well. My earlier comment about how the grid is a little bit unpolished is going to be shown here when I click Edit. This is how it represents how we're going to show the class. It's saying we have a label of class, description of set of CSS class, a key of class, and it's going to be a text string. So when I show you this, you're going to see that we can add to this. I mean, if we wanted to, we could add anything we want to this, right? We'll call this secondary class. Set a secondary CSS, class 2, and boom, we've got class and secondary class. The background style works exactly the same. The only difference here is we're using an image picker view, and it includes a modifier for how it's going to modify how it's going to emit that out. Here are the toolbars that are allowed inside of the editor here. The style sheet. So the style sheet is kind of quite important. We'll talk about that in a second, but typically what you want to have selected is simply just a style sheet required for Bootstrap and your RTE. This is the size of the actual thing is rendered in the editor. This is the maximum size for images. It will render any image you put in the grid at that size or smaller. There's two different kinds of rich text editors we can have in here. And then we can specify any image that's uploaded is uploaded to a particular folder. So I can choose that I want it to all be under the homepage folder. Select that. And then save that. So if we go back to something that's using that grid, here we are. This is the grid. Let me delete some stuff out of here real quick so you can see what it looks like when it's empty. Okay, so here's the grid. And it starts off with kind of an add content. We've got these things here. You'll notice our CSS class and our secondary class. That's where you can set those plus a background image. Then we can say add content. Actually, this is content itself that could be removed, but anyway. Actually starts not with this. Sorry. It starts with this. So we can add a type of row. So we're going to add like a headline style row. Then inside here we add content. And I'm going to add a headline. We say hello. Then add more content below it. Rich text editor. This is some content. Here we can change if we want that CSS class. So BG primary. Oops. Mary. There we go. We could add a secondary class. We could add a background to this thing, which I'm not going to do right now. And then we can add a whole nother section to this grid. So maybe this next section is one like this. So over here we're going to have a macro, selected features, which is probably going to die on me. Yeah. Or rich text, that works. And then over here we can have, an image. And you can see it's kind of a semi-WYSIWYG way for us to work. And it's really cool because it allows any number of sections to be added to the page, allows some customization of like the background or the banding on the page allows different kind of flex layouts to be shown here. We save and publish and then go and view this page. We'll see it's got all of our content and it should be responsive. So if I pull this down, you can see it pops below the other content. Make sense? On the template side of things, to render a grid, it's pretty simple actually. Over here in settings, we're going to find a template that uses this. So let's find our content page. And my grid name was main content area. And all I have here is, I'm just seeing if there's data in the grid, because if I try and render the grid with nothing, it gets mad at me. So I'm seeing if there's any data at all. And if so, there's this get grid HTML. I pass in just my base model. This is my alias. And then this right here is going to tell us, tell it what is going to be rendering this grid. So let me show you something real quick. If I open up Visual Studio, and this one's, we'll note, is Bootstrap 3 Fluid. I go into Partials, Grid. I'm going to find this Bootstrap 3 Fluid. This is what's going to render that grid content. You can see it's not all that complex. Mostly, it's just grabbing the sections. It's rendering them here, and then it's got a couple of helpers. This is just a render row helper, a couple of functions to do a couple things, and that's it. So it's just using this to create the correct markup for Bootstrap grid. So you could have multiple here. So you can notice I've got Bootstrap 3 and Bootstrap 3 Fluid. We could add a foundation one to here. We could add whatever else we wanted. The other thing I want to point your attention to is this file right here. This is called grid.editors.config.js. That list of the different things we could add there, remember our rich text editor, image, macro, embed, headline, quote, all those ones, this is what defines them. And this is another area in which I say that the grid's ability to be all manipulated in the editor is not fully there. If we wanted to add our own type here, we totally could, and it's pretty easy. If we look at one of these, like for example, here's the one for image. This is an Angular template that is basically acting on the name of the node. We are saying that the alias we want to use is called media. We're saying the view we want to use, or that is to say the picker we want to use, is a media. And then it's saying I want a special icon for this. If we look at the headline, headline's even more simple because it's going to render itself. So here we go. We have a template named headline. We're just going to have a text string here, and in the config, we're going to say when we're going to emit this thing, it's just going to emit that little block of code. The quote's going to be very similar. Instead of H1 tags, though, it's going to put in a block quote tag. And that's all there is to these editors. So we could add whatever other type we wanted to as little partlets that get put into a grid. And lastly, so let's take this embed editor. So over here, there are these editors inside the grid. And here we go. We've got one for embed. Sorry, maybe it's embed. There it is, embed. So this is doing a little bit of code and then emitting this markup. So it can even just be any Razor data. It's going to get, whatever was sent to it, and it's going to do whatever else we need. This is a very simple wrapper. I don't think any of these wrappers are complex. Macro is simple-ish. Media is maybe a little bit more because there's some stuff here, but yeah, these are all just very simple helpers to get the media picker. And I think that's all to say about grid. Any questions on grid? Okay, so we're running a little low on time, so I'm going to a little bit yada, yada, yada through the rest of this. Lists. There's a way for us to create nested contents that are like lists. They're kind of handy. So we have a page, for example, on the site that has a bunch of cards. It's rendered as list content. Translations, we did show that enough that I'm comfortable just kind of skipping that. So list and translations walkthrough I can do real quick. Basically what happens is in document types, I can create a particular kind of document type that doesn't have a template. Or I can create a collection that does this all for me. So let's say I want a carousel, and I want carousel images to be inside of it. I can automatically create that. It creates the two relationships automatically for me. And I can create whatever I need in here. So, you know, image. Yeah. So real quickly, just grab a not member picker, on a media picker. Picker. Okay. From here, what I can do is in the document type of something else. So we'll go on Student Success Center to play with. I can then add in my test section here, I can add a property called cards. Oh, sorry, carousel image. There we go. A broken arm or something. Okay, and in here I can say use existing, and then what I'm looking for is in lists I want nested content. Where did it go? Nested content. In nested content I can pick the element type, which apparently don't have all the settings here on carousel. I need to make sure carousel is set up correctly. But for the sake of hurrying up, I'm going to say card. This group, this is, you know how we have those different sections? This is what group we're going to be editing. You can only edit one of the groups in here. So you can pick which one, or if you don't specify it, it'll pick the top one. This template is an Angular template. It allows us to do things like let's say the card had something called image. We can say image dot name, and it'll show that instead of just a 1, 2, 3, 4. It'll show that for the card. You can say we want a minimum of 0, maximum of 12. Whether we're going to confirm delete, we want to show icons, we're going to hide label. There we go. And so now, if we go to a Student Success Center document, save. We go to a Student Success Center document. We can see that we've got this test. We say add content. And here we go. We can add one of these things. And if we want another, we can just say that, add more content, add more content, add more content, until we're done. Okay, so that's lists. Let's see, recipes. I was going to show you how to do a job listing page. I don't think we have time for that. I did want to show you some of the plugins I wrote real quick, but the plugin is really cool. Allows you to act upon different events, so like media published as an event, document published as an event, that kind of thing. We can even create some things like we can publish media, we can publish events, publish whatever. We can change how the system works, like the image URL thing or the media picker thing. Okay, so let me show that real quick, and then we'll be done. So where is... If you look over here in NuGet Gallery, we've got a few things. We searched for Mindfire. We got 17 packages total. In there, there's at least a couple of them there on Umbraco. So this DB sync one we'll look at, and then there's this simple media URL one we'll look at. So if I can move this out of my way. Oh, there's stuff in chat. Okay. Let's look at the simple media URL first. This is a plugin you just simply add, and you can be done. If you want a local path property, you can add that, and it'll automatically populate it. So here's how it works. We have this simple media service, and these are all, because they're plugins, they're all kind of probed for whether they implement any of the things inside of implement this event handler. There's this application started event handler that I'm going to override, and inside of it, I can grab whatever dependencies I want. In this case, I'm interested in these two. I'm going to forward along that event, and then I'm going to say media service saving. I want to add a hook to saving, and then I want to add a hook if we move something in media. On the saving, I actually go to the work to make sure there's a folder in that spot. And then I move that file to that spot. If it contains a particular property, I'm going to update that. So that local path property I was telling you about, it's going to be set with whatever path it's actually at. On the move, I'm just making sure that I'm actually move the file rather than just being a logical move. And then everything else is just kind of a helper. So this is pretty simple. These moves are an aggregate. So for each item inside of it, I'm going to need to do a save, and for each item inside of the save or side of the moved, I'm going to need to relocate, etc. So that's pretty simple. This DB sync one is kind of an interesting plugin. What it does is it will synchronize content of a document with a database. We use this, for example, on Utah Geek events. When an event is created in the Utah Geek events Umbraco CMS, an event will also be created in the Utah Geek events event table. Likewise, here we're showing the event and all the stuff that's done there. And then here we have a presentation. So if a presentation is created in Umbraco, a presentation is also created in that table. And it can also work vice versa. So if someone adds a piece of data to that table, it'll eventually notice that piece of data is there, and it'll automatically create a document in the right spot. Most of the stuff here is auto-mapped. If the name is the same, it'll auto-map. Some of the stuff we mapping between the two. So we're saying the field name is event name, but the alias in Umbraco is called name. Or here we have the field name is site ID, but we're just going to default that to 1 and not worry about any input. Event ID, it's going to be an integer, and we're going to just map that straight across, et cetera, et cetera. You can see we have auto-mapped stuff and stuff. Anyway, it's a really cool thing. But let's show you the code real quick, at least Umbraco part of it. So this is the one-way sync. This is about event handler. So again, we've got our inheriting from event handler. We do our application started, then we get whatever it is we want. So in this case, I'm looking for all those table mapping configs, and then I initialize them. And then the rest is uninteresting stuff about what I'm doing with that. But you'll notice I've got a save document hook. Anytime a document is updated, it'll also update the database copy of it. Host path. we're interested if the content is saved or updated, deleted, or trashed. Trashed is kind of a recycling bin notion. And in trashed, I think what we do is just kind of unpublish it. Anyway, so that's essentially it. There's one more thing I wanted to show that I didn't show, so let me show real quick now. Umbraco is really cool about what you can do here in terms of something else. I can say, I want to set culture and host names for this. I can say this host names, for example. We can have this be one domain and another root underneath it be a completely different domain, a completely different site. So it's really flexible that way. We can create different languages for these different pages. So in here, we can do something else. We can say we want the cultures for this, and we're going to say this is the language, English language one, and then we can add a Spanish one, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really kind of powerful that way too. Let's see, translations. We only have an English dictionary currently, but we could add another dictionary that has these same keys in it. Get our translations. Packages is where we add our plugins. There are tons of different plugins for this thing.